But Star Trek Phase 2 Origins has just finished filming, right? And we're going to talk about that, I assume, today. Everybody, please welcome Alena Van Arendonk.
I'm so impressed you got my name right. When you go through kindergarten with the name Alena Van Arendonk, your teachers just hate you. They're taking attendance and they get to the bottom of the list and, yeah, that's me. I'm gonna copy you. If I can do so without killing myself. And I'm bringing my caffeine with me. You can't stop me. Look, I'm in the captain's chair. It's exciting. Hi. I'm kind of surprised to see all of you. It's Sunday, and usually Sunday everybody's recovering, but I'm glad to see you're all happy and well. I'm Alena, as you know. I had the opportunity to work on a couple of episodes of Phase 2 this year, and I spent several weeks in New York shooting it, and had a lot of fun. So I'm going to share a little bit with you, and if you hang around, I will have the teaser for the Origins episode that I have a not quite finished copy of, but it's good enough to show and give you an idea of what's coming. And I will happily entertain any discussion of Star Trek or non-Star Trek related anything, because I like to chat with people and talk and do Q&A. My remote control over there is ready to push buttons. Beep! Yay! All right, a little bit of background. I'm assuming many of you, I saw a lot of hands go up, are familiar with Phase 2. But a little bit of background on the series. Several years ago, this has been, what, 2004 maybe? It's been a number of years now. Some fans got together in New York and put together a couple episodes of a Star Trek series that were original to them. And the series was called Star Trek New Voyages. And in fact, if you go to the Phase 2 website, the URL is still officially StarTrekNewVoyages.com. And they started gathering a little bit of momentum. They had more fans who found them on the internet and said, I want to play Star Trek 2! I want to play Star Trek 2! Because everybody does. And the project kept growing, and they got more sets and more costumes and more actors and more scripts, and members of the original cast started getting involved. George Takei, Walter Koenig, Barbara Luna, several other people from the original series had called up and said, hey, I'd love to be a part of this with you. Can I come and appear in an episode? And they did, which is a lot of fun. And so much easier when I had an electronic remote. And over time, the show developed into what is now Star Trek Phase 2, which is a little larger scale production. A lot of you probably know this, a lot of you probably remember this, but in the late 1970s, there were plans for a second Star Trek TV series to be called Star Trek Phase 2. There were actually a number of scripts, half a season's worth of scripts written for that show. The show was cast, the show was in pre-production, and then one of the episode scripts was pulled out and they said, this would make a pretty good motion picture. They made Star Trek the motion picture. And they canceled the TV series in the process. Star Trek Phase 2 has kind of continued on into this web series in that we not only have a lot of the original cast and crew members involved, but we have a lot of the original episode scripts involved. We've actually got a couple episodes in the series based on the original Phase 2 scripts that were never shot, and we have some other ones coming up in plan for the next year or two. We do about 2 or 3 shoots a year, so it's not a very fast series. But in the next year or two, we have some plans to shoot more additional episode scripts from that series. So it's not quite as good as getting your next series of Star Trek that never happened, but we're doing our best to make it so. That was an unintentional pun. Wow. I just made a pun, that's great. I grew up in the original series. I wasn't a Next Generation kid, so I'm still learning about Next Generation. Beep. So this is my background. I am a competitive costumer. I do, as you can see, I like dressing up as things. I do costume competitions. I do things mostly based on anime and video games. Not so much sci-fi. I like sci-fi. I just haven't been near as involved in the fandom as I have in other venues. And how I got involved in Phase 2 grew directly out of this. I go to a lot of anime conventions, a lot of video game conventions, and I do a lot of costume competitions. And in going to these conventions over the years, I've made a lot of friends and contacts there. Most of whom are fellow costumers, a few of whom are guests who I meet at the cons, and one of whom is a voice actor who's very well known in the anime sphere, named Vic Mignogna. And he just appeared at a lot of cons that I was at. We got to know each other, we're kind of in contact. We were friends on Facebook, that sort of thing. And one day I got a message from him, opened my email, and there's a message from Vic. It says, you do prosthetics work in your costumes, don't you? And I said, well, yeah. I mean, I've done a couple of characters with prosthetics, and I can put on ears and that sort of thing. He says, how do you feel about Spock? Okay, I used to watch Star Trek when I was a kid. I like Spock, why? He says, give me your phone number, I have a call for you. So he calls up and he says, our regular makeup guy, I work on this Star Trek web series, and since I was not very involved in sci-fi fandom, I wasn't really familiar with Phase 2. He said, I work on this Star Trek web series, and our regular makeup guy who normally does Spock's ears is not going to be able to make the next shoot. Would you be available to come and put on Spock's ears? And I'm thinking, okay, it's a web series. I've seen web series before. It's like a fan production. Some guys get together with a camcorder and they make a show, and oh sure, I'll come put on Spock's ears. I had no idea what I was getting into, none. I said, great, I'll send you the link, you can watch some episodes. There's this episode with George Takei I think you'll really like. And I'm stopping going, wait a minute, George Takei, this is not a camcorder series, is it? So I get on and I start watching the episodes, and I watch all of the episodes that are online, and I think, oh boy, this is a much bigger production than I realized. This is actually a full television production. And indeed it is. Almost all, the cast and crew of the show is all volunteer. Everybody comes and volunteers their time and has a great time doing it. But many of them, most of them actually, are professionals in television and movie production who volunteer their time because they love Star Trek. So we have a very talented special effects engineer from Germany who comes over to do the series and works on our special effects. And we have several professional Hollywood cameramen who come and bring their own cameras and shoot the series. So the feel is a little intimidating when you walk on the set and you realize, wow, I thought I was coming to just dress up and play Star Trek with some people, and we're actually doing a full television production in the studio. This is great. But it was a wonderful experience. So that's how I first got involved. My first duty there was primarily makeup. I was on the makeup crew, and I was actually, for this episode, I was in charge of Spock, his prosthetics, his makeup, his eyebrows, his wigs. That was my main duty, and then I ended up doing half the rest of the cast as well because we had a lot of cast members in this episode. And so on the right, you've got me on the set going from place to place. I had to keep the makeup looking fresh on the set, which is kind of a challenge because our building is not very climate controlled, and we were shooting in June, and our transporter room is upstairs under a metal roof, and it was over 100 degrees. And if you've ever worked with theatrical makeup or movie makeup, even in 100 degrees, the makeup doesn't stay on. So we were doing a lot of touch-ups. But as I was also involved in the production of the series as an actress. One of our phone calls when we were organizing things, Vic says, you know, there's a couple of roles in the show that we haven't cast yet, and we just need a female actress to step in and play those. And he had seen me actually in this very hotel last year. There was an anime convention that I was working at, and we had done an improv show to kill some time. We had one of our guests wasn't able to make it, and we had some time in the schedule, so we did just a quick little whose line is it anyway type improv show, and Vic happened to be there because his panel was next. And so he said, you do acting, right? I said, I've done some acting, not recently. And he said, well, good, because I told James Cully is the executive producer of the show, he said, I told James that you were a really great actress and you'd had all this acting experience, and we want you to do this role. I said, Vic, I haven't been on stage in 10 years. I did acting a long time ago. And he said, oh, it's fine, you'll do fine. And so I said, well, okay, what's the role? He said, Carol Marcus. So I go to the library and I check out The Wrath of Khan, which I didn't own a copy of, and I rewatch it a couple times. So I ended up being Carol Marcus, and then I also did some extras work for another episode, which was great because you get to wear a uniform and sit in the bridge and push the buttons. And if any of you have, and I'm assuming you're this type of person, ever been the type of person who wanted to dress up and play, hey, pretend I'm in this world and I'm in this universe and I'm in this television show, the experience of walking into a 360-degree, totally accurate bridge of the Enterprise is amazing. And all of the other sets, the transporter room is accurate down to the final detail. Everything is exactly as it appeared in the series, mostly because James Cully has the original series blueprints that he was able to recreate every element of, which is a wonderful thing. But it's amazing to walk in there and say, I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise, and that's the real captain's chair. There's the view screen. There's engineering. Everything's here. And then, you know, after 3 weeks on the set, you're realizing, oh, and then we're going to tear down this set and build this other set over here out of the same pieces, and wow, this goes together really well. It feels kind of like I'm a shoestring budget 1960s TV series. But it was a lot of fun to do. I want to give you a few scenes. There are not very many production photos on the internet, so I want to show you a few that I've gotten clearance to show because they're pretty controlling of where their information goes. They don't want people just making up stuff. But the sets and the crew and the cast were great people, and I want to give them a chance to shine as well, even though they can't all be here. Our Origins episode involves some flashbacks. In fact, most of the episode is a flashback. So we balanced a lot between current series Enterprise and Cage Era Bridge Enterprise, and there were a lot of set pieces to change. And this is, I have to come over and show you on the screen who these people are. It's really dark, you can't see them. James Cully's hiding over here somewhere, and here's our cast in the middle. On the far left, which you actually can't see, this, I'm not sure it'll help, I think the projector's just not very bright. This kind of ghostly figure right here is David Gerald. He wrote The Trouble with Tribbles. He also directed and wrote this episode. So we do have a lot of people from the original series involved, which is great fun. Get to chat with them about all the stuff they did originally. And I'm actually behind this lighting guy. You can't see me, but I'm really there. And we've popped out the view screen in this case because there were a bunch of people coming through to watch the shooting, and so there's no view screen, but there are a bunch of floating heads there. Why can't we have stairs on this side of the stage? Come on that side. I'm just gonna hang out over here. Beep. This is our transporter room. Everybody does everything in this production, with the exception of Grip and Electric. We have distro boxes that each box contains about as much power as 15 to 20 residential houses. We're not allowed to touch those. But for the most part, everybody volunteers everything else, and here we're doing a lot of lighting setup in our transporter room. And that's me on the left. This is what I look like when I'm not in costume. You don't get to see me very often not in costume, but this is what I look like when I'm not in costume. And everything's very as accurate as we can get it in the space that we have, but there's also a lot of fudging going on, as there is with any production, and camera angles are important, and lighting is important, and we cheat shamelessly. The Origins episode, which I will give you a little teeny teaser of, is based on a story that was written by David Gerald as a script for the original Star Trek series in the 1960s. It was called The Protracted Man. It was about an individual who got caught in a transporter malfunction that separated him into different temporal phases. And it was written as a treatment for a script in the 60s. It did not get filmed. David Gerald later rewrote it as a short story and sold it, and it was published in several of his short story collections. And in this version, they took the short story and rewrote it as a flashback to young Kirk's life at the Academy. So it's not set in current Enterprise time, but it's set as a flashback. The fun part about this is that it features a lot of characters from the series that we only get to see in 1 or 2 episodes. So on the left is Jeff Johnson, who plays Finnegan. Everybody loves to hate Finnegan. He's from the episode Shore Leave. And Jeff is so dead on. I rewatched the episode. I'd been shooting in New York for a few weeks, and then I was sitting in my motel room one night, and hey, I'm shooting Star Trek during the day, I might as well watch it at night. So I pulled up the episode online and watched it, and I sent Jeff a message and said, "Are you sure you're not related to this actor? Are you sure you're not just a clone of him?" Because he is scarily accurate. He's very, very good. And he's the type of person who really enjoys being Finnegan. So he will come up, I'm putting on makeup on an actor, and he comes up and he goes right next to my face and waits for me to turn into it. Just that sort of person. He's a great guy. And we also have dark photo that doesn't show up. We also have Gary Mitchell in this series. Brian Tubbs on the right is playing Gary Mitchell. And he's Kirk's friend at the Academy who later slightly goes evil and gets the powers of a god, and his eyes glow silver. For very early in the series. I would say spoiler warning, but I'm sure you've all seen it a few times. And so we get flashbacks to these individuals and their life at the Academy in small snippets. And we also get Carol Marcus, who doesn't really have any reason for being at the Academy, but I'm kind of glad she was there because it meant I got to play Star Trek too. And Carol Marcus, if all of you have seen The Wrath of Khan, I'm sure, but Kirk's love interest and the mother of his child later on. In this episode, I generally did not have the child, although there were a lot of jokes about that, let me assure you. The other thing that's kind of unique about Phase 2, and there are a lot of really great fan series out there, but I enjoyed being part of this one because we had so many people who were professionals in their industry who came and dedicated their time and their effort and their expense to be there. This is your general cast from part of the episode, but we have a whole lot of professional actors who said, Star Trek sounds great, I want to come be a part of this. So people who filled out their SAG waivers so they didn't have to be paid, and then came and sometimes, in some cases, gave up paying jobs that they'd been hired for TV. They had opportunities to do television shows or award shows or public appearances, and they gave them up to come do Star Trek with us. So I'm going to introduce you to a few of the people who aren't regulars, people you may not be as familiar with in the series. Young James T. Kirk at the Academy is played by Matthew Ewald, who is best known for starring in a kids series called Galador in about 2002. It's a Fox kids series, very popular among that age group, but not a lot of other people know it because most of us weren't watching kids series in 2002. He's also been in several other films, and he just finished shooting Indigo Child, which is a horror film in West Virginia about 2 weeks ago. A very talented actor. He's very convincing as Kirk because he happens, when not in this picture, but if you've seen Phase 2, James Cawley plays regular Kirk, adult Kirk, I guess, for lack of a better term. And when his hair is dyed and he's made up properly, he looks exactly like a young James. They could be father and son. In fact, they kept getting mistaken for that when they'd go out during the shoot to a restaurant or something. Everybody thought they were related. So he's very convincing as the younger version of James. Colin Cunningham, who plays Captain Pike, who also makes an appearance in this show, is best known for being in every Stargate series ever made. He plays Major Paul Davis in Stargate, and he's also done a lot of other shows. Colin, little factoid, is the single best, most talented, most skilled magician I have ever seen in my life, and I'm including David Copperfield in that. I have never seen a magician as amazing and blows your mind good as Colin. He's the type of person he's sitting in a restaurant next to you and he just picks up the spoon and bends it in a knot in front of you with one hand. And you have no idea how he's done it, and then he hands it to you. And things like that, he can just whip off any trick. He's also an amazingly talented actor. There are some clips on YouTube, if you go hunting around, of a scene with Colin and Matthew from the rough cut of this episode. It's obviously not finished being edited yet, but Captain Pike chewing out young Kirk, and young Kirk wishing he had never been born, more or less. That's about a 2-minute scene, you can find it on YouTube, but you get to see a little bit of his acting there. Vic Mignogna. Vic is best known as a voice actor. He does video games and anime and dub acting, mostly. He's also a musician. He's recorded several albums, and he does a little bit of television work, not a lot. He directed a couple of previous episodes of Phase 2, including one that's due to be released any day now, we hope, in which he plays a very terrifying Klingon. And you look at Vic and he's like, oh, he's a nice guy, he's got blonde hair, he's kind of soft-spoken, he doesn't look like a Klingon. He's a scary Klingon. He's a very good Klingon. So if you have a chance to see that episode, this is what he looks like when he's not being a Klingon. And he plays George Kirk, young Kirk's father, who, James Kirk's father, I should say, who also makes an appearance in this episode because it's a flashback episode and we'll put in anybody we can reasonably get in there for fans to say, oh look, it's my favorite character. Brandon Stacy is our Spock. There have been several Spocks over the course of Phase 2 because the show's been running for about 6 or 8 years. James met Brandon on the set of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie. James was actually in the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movie as kind of a bit part just because J.J. wanted him in there. But Brandon was doing double work, stand-in work for Zachary Quinto because they are dead ringers. But picture on the bottom, you can't get quite the same resemblance there, but you can see how much they look alike. Brandon gets stopped on the street on an almost daily basis and asked to sign photos of Zachary Quinto because he looks just like him. It's very, very creepy, actually. He can do the expressions and everything. You know, I'm doing his makeup. I worked with Brandon a lot because I was in charge of putting on his ears, doing his prosthetics work, his eyebrows, everything else, which meant that we had to get there an hour or two earlier than everybody else. And we spent a lot of time in the makeup room being exhausted and drinking a lot of caffeine. But it's really creepy. I watched Heroes. I knew Zachary Quinto as Sylar from Heroes, who's a really scary villain. And then I wake up in the morning, the first thing I go in and I see that face looking at me. I'm like, I'm gonna put your makeup on now, please don't take my brain out. But Brandon's a super nice guy. He's very creative. He has his own production company and he's working on some amazing projects right now as well. Does a lot of small part TV acting, a few movies, lots of independent films, mostly what he does. But he, in addition to Star Trek, he's working on some horror series and some sci-fi series that should be very interesting to watch when they're out. Gina Hernandez, very good friend of mine. Now, I met her at Star Trek, we talk a lot. She is a very talented actress who does a lot in the Star Wars fan films. If you've seen Star Wars Revelations, Pitching Lucas, some of her other recent work is more mainstream, like Salt and Running Wild. But she's done a lot of Star Wars fan films, and then this was her chance to come and do Star Trek fan films because she's equal opportunity geekdom. And her husband Frank was also in the show. And Gina played number 1, who, of course, from The Cage, the Menagerie. She very much looks like Majel Barrett when she's made up, with her hair poofed up and with the 1960s makeup. Several people there working on Phase 2 had worked on either the original series or the movies and had met Majel Barrett and kept coming up and saying how remarkable it was that she looked just like her, and they kept talking to her, expecting her to respond in a computer voice. But she had a lot of fun being number 1 as well. Okay, and I can do video now or I can do video later after Q&A. It's your choice. What do you want to do? Do video now. Okay, that means we can switch gears. while we're switching computers, my little puny netbook that this presentation is running on cannot handle the Blu-ray quality video that is going to be streaming, so we're going to switch computers to a higher quality one. In the meantime, we get to look at a really cool view screen thing. So while we're switching computers, anybody have any questions or comments or satiric remarks they'd like to make?
No, you mentioned the original captain's chair. James Cullen does have a lot of the actual props.
Yes, James actually has the original everything. James was a protege of Bill Tice, who was the designer for the original series, which is how he was a huge Star Trek fan as a kid. He worked on the Next Generation series. He was one of the costumers from that series. And he worked with Bill Tice extensively, and Bill, in his will, apparently left James the original blueprints, the original patterns from the original series, the templates for making the actual braid used on the captain's uniform. All of that. James has the original handmade everything from the series, which is how he can build a totally accurate bridge set or make the actual costumes. James also has, because he went hunting it down and purchased every scrap of it that existed, the original fabric that the original costumes were made of. He found in the storage warehouse that had belonged to Paramount were the rest of the bolts of fabric that they used to sew those costumes. So he has the original fabric, which is very well guarded. And so it's neat because it's not only, you're not only in a world of people who are very dedicated to Star Trek and people who are very committed to making as good a quality production as possible, but you have the means to make that good quality production. You have the templates for the captain's chair. The captain's chair on our bridge is, there was a specific, I'm going to show my lack of geekdom and not be able to name it, a specific model of office chair that was used for that. James found a vintage office chair of that same model and constructed, using blueprints, constructed the same captain's chair, all the same electronics. It was nice walking up here and seeing all the LCDs because it makes me feel right at home, because you walk onto the bridge and everything's blinking at you. And along with that, we have original tricorders, original props, very accurate phasers, not necessarily the ones used on the original series, but constructed from the same molds. And it's really amazing as somebody who grew up watching Star Trek to go in and say, look, I'm touching it, and I saw it on TV, and I'm touching it. And then they take it away from you and don't let you play with it anymore. But at least you get to play with it for the scene. I'm in a med bay scene in Origins. Carol Marcus is assisting Dr. McCoy for reasons unknown, but hey, it worked on screen. And we were looking for props for the characters to be holding and passing around, and so we'd pull out a tricorder, and we'd pull out a medical scanner, and we'd pull out the salt shakers, the original 1960s salt shakers that were used in the series, because all of their props in medbay were things like bottles and salt shakers. And you look at this and, wow, this show was super low budget, and it looked so futuristic and awesome at the time. But it's amazing to see what you can match up and what you can make work. But yes, it is, a lot of the stuff you see on the series is either an original series prop, a very accurate replica of an original series prop, or built from the same blueprints and specs as the original series. And the costumes are all made from the original fabric. That ghastly yellow velour that the captain wears, it's actually ghastly yellow velour. It's fuzzy, it's like Velcro, you stick stuff to it. In fact, for Origins, when we had accessories that had to go on the little insignia and things, they're Velcro backed, they just stick on the shirt because the shirt is loop velour. I have no idea who in the 60s thought that would be a good idea. I didn't grow up in the 60s, so maybe it was good in the 60s, I don't know, but I look at that now and I do costumes all the time. Everything in me says, that's a nightmare to keep clean and I don't want to work with it because it's going to snag on everything, and of course the entire cast was wearing it. So one other thing that we had for Origins, we had to remake all the costumes because all of the costumes we had in the costume, the wardrobe department, were current main series, original series is what I'm trying to say. Original series costumes, the Cage era costumes were different fabric, different cut, slightly different patterns. And of course he had the patterns and the fabric for both of those, so of course all the costumes for the entire cast got to be remade to Cage era specifications. The shuttlecraft had to be rebuilt for Cage era specifications. The bridge had to be rebuilt for Cage era specifications. And if somebody didn't correct the props or change the chairs from blue to white at the right time, we had to reshoot the scene. So we all got very good at spotting what's Cage era and what's original series era. Anything else? You're all just waiting for the... Is our computer up yet? Okay. Oh, yes.
I just thought, what was the idea, or where did the idea come from for all the costuming for all the different characters
As I understand it, Bill Tice was responsible for almost all of it. Obviously, I'm not the first person, you know, I'm just telling this third or fourth person, but Bill was the head of design. I think there were some individuals who had influence over certain guest characters or things, but I know that Bill drafted and had all of the original patterns for every costume that was made, even of the guest stars, for the entire series, because that's what James has now. So all of those came from Bill's private collection. I'm assuming he's the one who drew them all up. Probably, I would guess, just from the way productions go, that directors and producers would give input on, oh, I want this character to look kind of like this, or to have these influences. You know, I want this to have kind of a Greek influence or a Roman influence. But I think Bill probably had all of the final say in what they actually wore and what they looked like, because it was his job. Yes.
Total geek question.
Okay.
You were there, so you may have seen it. On Colley's reproduction of the captain's chair, does he have the coffee stain on the carpet?
You know, the carpets had just been cleaned when I walked in for the first time. In fact, they were still wet, so I don't think there was a coffee stain.
Because in the original, somebody spilled coffee.
Yeah.
It stayed there for 2.5 seasons. And when this thing was sold at auction, a couple of years back, 3 or 4 years back, whenever, they were showing some close-up pictures, and the stain was still in the carpet.
I don't remember seeing one, but I wasn't looking for it. But the carpet it's that durable business carpet anyway, and they just shampooed it when I walked in, because when I came in to the studio for the first time, which all the sets are permanently set up in the studio. When I walked into the studio for the first time, they had just rebuilt half of the bridge, so there was a lot of construction dust. So everything had just been scrubbed down, everything was repainted, everything was shampooed. I suspect anything that had been there was gone. I can't speak to before this year, because I didn't get there until this year, but as of right now, I don't remember seeing any. But, you know, we could go spill some coffee, and actually, we would probably get shot. We're not allowed to have food or beverages on the set on penalty of death and pain and other things. So probably we'd get shot for spilling coffee on the set.
I was just wondering with his attention to detail, if he would have actually...
It wouldn't have been there during the cage area.
Right.
That's true, yeah. Cage area, they would have had to shampoo it out. Yeah. Good point, good point. I can say safely that there was enough typical geek discussion going on that the people there certainly knew there was a chip out of the paint in this episode on the medbay doors, that sort of thing. I'm sure people know about it. I'm guessing that the decision was not to introduce that, because then it would have been, it would have been hard to change. One thing about having permanent sets is you don't have the room to rebuild everything every time. So switching between the modern bridge and the cage era bridge was enough of a pain to go back and forth. And they also use that for bridges of other ships. And there are rumors that they may be doing a later era episode coming up in the next couple of years. They want to be able to change things quickly. They want to be able to pull out chairs and put chairs in, and pull out panels and put panels in. There are several panels for each of those things that just pop out and drop in all the electronics while you're in. So I'm totally guessing here because I haven't discussed it with them, but I would guess that the decision was to keep things versatile and not have anything identifiable that couldn't be swapped out. As it is, we used a lot of pyrotechnics in this episode. We blew up the bridge a few times, and we had to repaint the bridge because there are smoke stains and fire stains all over the paint too. So there's a lot of reworking that has to be done in between each episode. Anything else? Okay, well let's get on to what you all want to see, which is the trailer. Let's tease it.
Standard orbit, Captain.
Starfleet welcomes us home, Captain.
I only wish we were under better circumstances, Jade. Is there anything I can do? You know, you've got to deal with this. If not for your own sake, for your mother's. She's not. She's already lost a son. Now this, and you've lost...
I know that lost.
Look, I know you hate to lose. You'd rather cheat than lose.
Damn it, Bones, I know!
Here we go.
3 Klingon warbirds coming in fast. Position in 45 seconds. Open hailing frequencies. You won't respond.
I gave you an order. I didn't ask for a discussion.
Time. Have it your way, Jimmy boy. Hailing frequency zone.
Klingon vessels, do not fire. I repeat, do not fire. We are on a rescue mission. Our shields are down. We are not hostile.
They're firing disruptors! Well, so much for neutral. Your end over your head.
Shields up.
Shields are down 50%.
Lock phasers. Stand by to fire.
That's not exactly peaceful, Jimmy.
They're not giving me a choice.
They could be testing you.
3 hits is not a test. Fire at will! Fire!
Space. The final frontier. These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission: to explore strange new worlds, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
As you can see, it's a very short episode. We blow the Enterprise up in the first 2 minutes. So there you go. That's it. That's the end of the series. So that's obviously that's not the final edit. The audio is still being balanced, but it's what was done at this point that I could show you. Yes.
What is the current relationship between this web series and the people who own all the rights to the original series, the Paramount thing? I mean, obviously they're allowing them to use the original music.
Well, there's a, I'm not sure how much of this I'm allowed to talk about. There were discussions going on between CBS Paramount and Retro Films, which produces Phase 2, earlier this year. They were discussing the possibility of a, I'm not sure I can talk about that.
I understand the question.
Yeah, no. What the way it works is this. It is not a licensed series. It is a sanctioned series, meaning they let it exist because they know it's free promo for them and it's popular, and they didn't, if anybody remembers about, I don't know, 12 or 14 years ago when all of these Star Trek fan sites, fan websites got shut down and they said, oh no, you can only use our licensed images and you can't have anything on, and all the fans rebelled and said, we hate you. They've been, ever since then, they've been kind of careful about not offending fans. At the same time, they wanted to host this series on StarTrek.com as their primary, their spotlighted fan production. There were discussions going on, legal discussions going on. I was not privy to them because I'm not part of the production staff, so I can't answer exactly what the status of that is. But I know that the company that owns the rights is very much aware of this series and is very interested in this series, and beyond that, I don't know what I can say without saying anything, saying too much.
What kind of working relationship do they have with the Roddenberry estate, or is there?
Rod Roddenberry actually assisted on several episodes. Gene's son was very involved in, I want to say, the first 3 or 4 episodes. He was kind of a consultant. And James was close enough friends with the Roddenberry family that when Gene died, Majel called him up and told him that Gene had died before the news was released. So he had a fairly close relationship, a personal relationship at least, with the family. I don't think Rod has done much on the last few episodes. I'm not sure what pursuits he's involved in right now, but he was actually listed in the credits as consultant on, say, the first 4 or 5 in the series. Currently, I don't know the status, but up to a point, there was certainly some communication there.
So they're friendly.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yes?
When is this due to be aired? Is it going to go on the web or TV? Or?
It is going on the web. It will be listed at StarTrekNewVoyages.com and a bunch of other fan sites. As far as the actual date, I don't know. Production did get pushed back 3 months because we had some issues with some of the footage and some things that had to be reshot for various reasons. So rather than being wrapped in June, we ended up wrapping in October, which is why I was back there for another 3 weeks. So I would guess, total estimation, it's going to be released the first half of next year to the web. There are actually 4 episodes in post-production right now, in addition to this one, that are waiting on one thing or another before they're actually released. One of them is due to be released this month. They made an announcement last month that the next episode in sequence would be released November, December. So there should be a new episode up in the next couple of weeks. After that, we have 4 more episodes that we have shot but are not being done editing. And if you've never done any video or film production, shooting is the fast part. The post-production, especially with a series with as many special effects as this has, because everything in here is special effects, just overload. The post-production, the special effects generation, the editing, the sound balancing and finalization, the sound effects, the music, the titling, all of that stuff gets done after the shooting. So I am hopeful it'll be first half of 2011. I can't guarantee that. It may be second half of 2011. I'm really hoping it's 2011 and not 2012. But there's so much backup to do on the post-production side that it gets out when it gets out. And at this point, I have no control over that anymore. So. The next one coming out is Enemy Starfleet, which I think they released a trailer for. That's the one with Barbara Luna in it. Yes. Yes.
I was in here Saturday night watching Trailer Park, and most of the movies that we were watching the trailers for, current films, it was obviously CG. Some was good CG, some was bad CG, but there was a lot of CG. And yet you say when they were doing the filming that you had to repaint portions of the set because the explosions created smoke stains and things. So they're using live explosives?
It's a combination. Everything you saw here was actual pyro. We blew up the bridge. We set the bridge on fire at one point. It was not intentional. Actually, the pyro, if you've worked with any pyro work, pyro doesn't always cooperate. You know, it goes off and then it doesn't go off, and then it goes off and then it doesn't go off. And the first 2 times were duds, and then the 3rd time blew the wall up, you know, that sort of thing. But it was all very safe. We had all the radio devices turned off. Everything was done properly. It's just that one of them caught the paint on fire. But when we use pyro whenever possible, except when it's going to put an actor in danger. So at one point there is a scene where an actor is sitting at his station and it blows up in his face and he's thrown backwards, which is not in this scene. It's later in the episode. We used pyro for all of the other explosions on the bridge. We used real smoke for that scene, but the actual explosion that hits him is CG, because it's a safety issue at that point. Obviously, all of our space scenes are CG. We actually have a K-Jera model Enterprise and a modern model Enterprise. Tobias Richter is our CG special effects guy, and he's a professional. He comes in from Germany. He is very high level in the German cinema, and he just loves Star Trek, so he comes and does it. And everything you see there is all of his work. But you know, we do as much as we can realistically. In Enemy Starfleet, if you've seen the trailers for Enemy Starfleet that are online, they were actually using pyro and blowing stuff up. Those are not CG explosions hitting the actors with dirt. Those are real explosions. There's some CG modification for some parts in that, because when you're shooting, things happen. Not all the pyro goes off. Sometimes you want a little more effect. Sometimes you want a little more light. Sometimes it's a safety issue. So, yes.
Could you tell me what the web address was again?
StarTrekNewVoyages.com. I believe if you go to Star Trek Phase 2, it resolves to Star Trek New Voyages, so you can get there either way.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Yes.
Did you get a chance to do any work on his other series, Buck Rogers?
No, he's got 2 other series in production right now. Buck Rogers, he's shopping, the pilot's finished, as far as I know, and he's shopping for sponsors. He's actually trying to sell it as a full TV series. I didn't, so I wasn't involved with the production of that, although I did meet some of the people who were involved in the production of that. And he's working on another series that I really desperately want to be involved in, but, oh yeah, I guess he has made it public because it's on Facebook. He's redoing the Wild Wild West, which is one of my favorite shows, and I would really like to be involved in that one, but he has not set production dates for that because obviously we want to get the Star Trek episodes out in public first before we start shooting another series to back up into the post-production line. But he has the train set mostly built. The actual train car, James West train car, awesome, amazing, looks amazing. There are pictures of it on the website and on Facebook if you look closely. Yes. Okay, thank you. I have 1 minute left. Any other questions? Okay, well I guess we have 1 minute left. So, thank you all for coming, and I will be hanging around for a bit if any of you want to chat for anything else.